Hello, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Pedro Marianel Herrera. I'm the head of the Passivhaus building platform. And for me, it's a great pleasure to accompany you today in the institutional event. And I'm going to try to moderate this debate. For us, the conference is very important. It's a very important event. And this year, even more so, given that this is the institutional part of the conference, because this is probably where we bring together the people with most capacity to generate transformation. And although the building platform defends passive buildings, we're also very active. We're accompanied by 5 of the 6 speakers that you had the opportunity to listen to. We've listened to 6 presentations, and I think that they've all touched upon Passivhaus in one way or another. We'll go into the details during the debate. Veronica Villagrasa, who's the Director General of Building Renovation in Aragon, Fernando Garcia Mozos of IDAI, Cecilia Ugoni, who's talked to us about Eco Bonus in Italy, and also Jose Antonio Carrillo, who is the Director General for Housing and Urban Planning in Castilla-La Mancha, and Bruno Gutierrez Cuevas, who is the President of the platform. Unfortunately, on this case, Iñaki Carnicero couldn't be with us for this session because due to his tight schedule, he's been very involved in the urban agenda. And it seems paradoxical that the urban agenda doesn't have a space for Passivhaus, but we'll continue in contact with Iñaki Carnicero, so we can now begin with the debate. First and foremost, and since current events often overwhelm us, I would like to talk about a study that we presented last week, a study that was published last week, a study that was carried out over the last 2 years on environmental quality and the condition of buildings in educational centres. This event today is focusing on renovation, refurbishment, and in schools, but we should also be acting there as well. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the floor to Bruno Gutierrez, who will talk to us a little bit about the current status of schools, whether Spanish schools would actually pass or fail in a potential test. Thank you very much, Pedro. That's correct. This week, we presented the report in a press conference. Many media have reported or published news stories about the presentation of the report, and I think you're all aware of the results. We got a 1 out of 10 in this subject in the comfort of our children, our students, our pupils in our schools. Therefore, as some of you know, this is a study that was carried out in about 50 schools throughout the whole of Spain. More than 700,000 data that were validated for the study. We measured comfort. Comfort was measured in terms of temperature, relative humidity, and also CO2 concentration, which is related, of course, to ventilation. That score is very bad. The result is very, very poor, which is aggravated given that we are immersed in the pandemic. An emphasis is being placed on the importance of ventilation, not just in schools, in classrooms, but in all buildings where we have to co-inhabit with other people. So you will have the opportunity to read this report and obtain more details on this report in a presentation that we'll be giving on the 29th of October. Okay, well, we could actually have a whole session on this report. Obviously, this is a very serious situation, the current status of our schools in Spain. But I would also like to explain to everyone who's listening in that you can send in questions via the chat, which we can then pass on to the speakers. As I mentioned, these conferences are very important. And it's something we often mention in the board. There seems to be something that we're not doing right because we're unable often to explain the transformation capacity of Passivhaus to the administration. If we could really get down to and commit to this. And I would like to ask Bruno, what would occur when we talk about renovation if we were to renovate all the homes in this country in accordance with the passive house standard. Well, you can imagine what the result would be when we talk about buildings. We could reduce CO2 emissions by 40%. And that would have a very strong impact. Passive house could have a very strong impact on the reduction of CO2 emissions. Energy demand could be reduced by 90% if we were to act on buildings, both new buildings and also renovated buildings in accordance with the passive house standard. So that's a 90% reduction in energy consumption, which would subsequently lead to substantial economic savings. This would have a direct impact on the quality of buildings and the quality of the environment, and that would clearly have a rebound effect on health, which would also have a positive impact on the health sector, because we would improve ventilation. Given the current circumstances of the pandemic, well, we know what the situation is, but after the pandemic is overcome, then there will be seasonal, for example, problems with flu, etc. So it's important to maintain interior air quality. You can just imagine what the impact would be. Great energy savings, strong positive environmental impacts by reducing CO2 emissions. Well, we often tend to ask ourselves the following, says Pedro. That's what we really want to aspire to. And I'm sure that there are many questions that come to mind. How much would all of this cost? What would the economic cost of all of this be? Well, in new buildings, we're talking about between 1% and 5%. And in rehabilitated or renovated buildings, we're talking, I think the gentleman said 50%, with a very quick return on investment, not just in economic terms, but also in terms of comfort and health. Okay. I think it was obviously you can understand that we are very much aligned with Bruno's ideas. And I always like to ask that question, what's the cost of building a passive house home? We also like to ask other questions. What would the cost of not doing this be? The economic cost? Because we may be setting aside many resources for other types of work instead of renewal or renovation. And what would the social and environmental costs be? These are the questions that we should all ask ourselves and which should help us to take decisions. Okay, let's move on to the other speakers now. I would like to start with Veronica Villagrasa. For us, these type of conferences are things that we really have great interest in. The autonomous government of Aragon has shown the ideas of many of the seeds that we've tried to promote in many of our conferences. In 2016 in Pamplona, and Teresa Navas also signed up to our manifesto, a manifesto that was presented for the first time in that conference in 2016. But it's not just the importance of the participation. In fact, she was the last person up on stage. She actually endorsed that commitment. And we can just see what the Aragon government's done since then. I expect that there are probably people listening in for the first time. The same occurred in 2016 with the government of Aragon and also many other public administrations. And although we would like there to be more examples of passive house initiatives, I'll mention a few. In Aragon, we have got the examples that Veronica presented in her presentation. There have also been some projects that I think, for example, include the 180 residential dwellings in accordance with the passive house standard. There's also initiatives in Bilbao and Barcelona and 190 council homes, the renovation of the Ministry of Finance building, and also the renovation of a library building in Asturias, and also 20 state-subsidized home, and also in Navarra, social centers, and 524 state-subsidized home for social rental. In Castilla y León, the infant school, in the renovation of a sports pavilion in Burgos, the renovation of the town council building in the autonomous community of Valencia, 25 state-subsidized home for social rental in Madrid, various libraries, which are currently in the tender phase. And we're also in discussions with the to try to ensure that state-subsidized homes are also constructed in accordance with the Passivhaus standard. So people listening in for the first time shouldn't think that, we've just started, but I would like there to be more initiatives. Veronica, I would like to ask you about your experience, public or you can perhaps comment on some of your projects. I understand it's been a hard task, which requires a lot of effort, but you've trained your technical staff, you've acquired experience, and you have a strong desire to continue. Could you please talk to us about the process and any other plans and projects that you would like to mention for people that may be interested in undertaking similar projects? Well, the government of Aragon, as I mentioned in my presentation, we wanted to play a leading role in renovation of buildings in the case of public heritage, because in addition to promoting the initiative in relation to state-subsidized homes and also private projects, we also have to protect our own heritage. And in the current scenario, we really cannot see any other way of approaching renovation work unless it is based on these type of standards. You've all presented the benefits very, very clearly. Furthermore, we shouldn't see this as an expense, as a cost. It should be considered an investment. And an investment whose benefits would be received directly by residents who will have access to these properties that we are going to renovate in accordance with those standards. In terms of other administrative authorities that really haven't jumped on the bandwagon yet or accepted or embraced the Passivhaus standard, all I can do is encourage them to do so and to create these type of initiatives. And perhaps we can play a leading role in social development. Private initiative is often several steps ahead of the administration, and we always tend to be trying to catch up with the rest of society. In this case, I think that we have to play a leading role. We have to really forge forward, because this is going to benefit citizens' health, the health of citizens who will have access to these buildings. In the autonomous community of Aragon and the government of Aragon, well, we have to say it's been a very satisfactory experience, not just in terms of staff training. I think it's fundamental that we're able to provide civil servants with access to this type of training. We also have to highlight promotion. It shouldn't just be the Aragon government telling them how to approach this. It's citizens that are resident in these homes. They have to tell us how happy they are, how comfortable they are, and the benefits that they've reaped from living in these type of homes. And we hope that in future projects, we could present the testimonies of people's experiences after a number of years living in these type of renovated homes. I would love to be able to do that. And in terms of the region of Aragon, I don't think there's a better place to be able to undertake these type of projects in accordance with the Passivhaus standard. So we have to do so. And, they're going to be the ones that will benefit most from this type of renewal work. So I would really like to listen to the testimonies of other people. And I think it's very important as public administrations that we promote research and studies, these type of returns on investment that we can obtain. So, as Bruno mentioned, in comfort terms, these type of issues are aspects that we will have to consider in coordination with universities. In this case, the University of Zaragoza is working very strongly in this area. I think it's fundamental. And this is also something that's going to lead us to success.
Specific actions. And then I would also like to say something else. We've brought two very, very specific papers, Fernando Garcia, where we're already talking about how we can help third parties in renovation activities. And I think it's clear that from within the administration, you can do this and you can carry out this in your areas and also find which are the most efficient tools to make sure that we can do this at our level, improving the quality of our buildings. And to this regard, we've seen different cases like cooperation with the IDAE in Spain, and something that's very new for us, like the Eco Bonus in Italy, which we found it a bit of a novelty, and we would like to cover this topic as well. Fernando, of course, the IDAE was a huge source of help. And we've heard this in many meetings with you. Nobody really knew what these actions were until they were finally invested, and that you also have a huge ability to do this because when you're funding certain solutions, you're also moving them forward. So as far as this is concerned, it really depends on the type of incentivation received, because that's going to have impact on the solutions. So how do you perceive this new plan? Because it actually happens at a regional level. Have you found any particularities that lead you to think that they're going to be efficient or not? And along the same lines to what we've heard about the Eco Bonus program, trying to understand whether it would be feasible to have a system like that in Spain. Would that give us a greater scope of action, ability to do something? I think that we're talking about 300 million euros, which is a lot of money. So tell us a little bit more about this. Well, we have designed it to even more ambitious. What has been actually demanded, even though the Parad had the opportunity of using different types of actions on buildings and schemes, and integral and full solutions could use many solutions, would receive more investment, covering the envelope and using renewables. The market has massively been requesting investment for envelopes. In fact, 90% of the grants provided have been for that and targeted to big community owners associations. This was an area that was dormant. So I think that we've been very successful there because we reactivated an area in the community associations with what it entails when it comes to decision making. Something very important about PARED, it also combines the possibility of grants and funding. 50% of the help has been for the grant or benefit and 50% for funding these projects directly. And the DA is later on paid back a fee by the Community Owners Association for 12 years. It includes many different types of requests, like from community owners associations, but it is very broad scope depending on the region, and it depends on the weather, climate conditions, it depends on the area and the type of request. Every region, in fact, is going to adapt this program to its own particularities, always trying to find a greater penetration and success and allocation of public resources to reactivate the industry. In fact, we understand that one of the problems of the industry is that there are not enough expert renovation companies. Spain has new building companies. The huge market in Spain has been new works. Renovation is something that is more crafts-like, of thinking, of designing, of adapting to the idiosyncrasy of the building with all the types of building. Well, sorry, we've had some audio problems. We're going to continue, if you agree, because it was a really interesting topic. Well, our experience with Pared has been extremely important. To tell you the truth, it has helped us to understand the industry, to understand its problems and the demands from each and every one of the regions. And we know it adapts better because we are increasing the flexibility and increasing solutions that may be more successful within each one of the regions and the type of request a type of building, whether it's a block, it's a single family home, townhouse, whether it is being requested by city council, and now the regions have to adapt it according to the royal decree and adapting it to the situation. And we understand the other adaptation is going to make it more successful than the borough itself, which was a statewide program with no specific particularity for its application. So we understand that now it's going to be more successful. It's going to reactivate the industry. We hope that it will be publicized and convened as soon as possible. We know that construction works are not easy to do. You've got to develop them, design them, ask for building permits, and it includes a whole inertia to finance, build, and develop works like these. But we've got to move faster, and we understand the market's going to move and that is going to be extremely successful. With respect to the eco-bonus, we understand that with a grant itself, an industry doesn't develop. It starts up with that, but we need other economic tools that will activate it and to make it move forward if we want to achieve all the gains that we want with the 1.2 million homes that we want to have built by the year 2030 and all the energy strategies that were included in the 2020 program. So we need fiscal tools and economic tools that will lead this forward. We need people to go to banks and get a loan, and for it to be given a special status and not just considered as a regular loan like an eco bonus. And we believe that to launch the industry, we need grants so that it can survive. It needs financial tools, it needs tax and fiscal tools like the eco bonus, for example. And of course, we have bedded for this not only from IDAE, where it is contemplated, but also other tools that have been laid on the table as a good example to follow, understanding that it is not the same type of country where Spain and Italy have a different structure, different type of administration, and though things may seem to be easy to replicate, it's not that easy. I understand that it is the only way for this to move forward and to achieve this. So it cannot be maintained in time. Thank you very much, Fernando. Just a second. I don't know if I can say something. You were talking before, Fernando, about the grants. State grants were mainly focused on the envelope of the building. Yes, the demand has been for that. And the grants have been for the envelope. So what we have seen in many cases where ventilation has not been worked on are suffering from condensation and other types of problems. So this leads me to asking myself the following question. Is this taken into account in the new state grant program? Though you could choose any type of solution and action for the building, the demand has been mainly for energy saving, but in many areas, they are taking into account all of the possible problems that may arise. Architects and developers who study building envelopes are not going to produce or create another problem. Of course not. They don't have that in mind, and they study coefficients and ratios like relative humidity, amongst others. Yes, Fernando, but I think that the core matter here is that grants should not only be allocated to the envelope only, because maybe that's not enough. I think we have to be more ambitious. Sorry, no. The grants was not only for the envelope, it could be for a comprehensive improvement of heating, ventilation, but the main requests have been for the building envelope, that they have the opportunity of asking for other types of projects. And why? Because the building industry is focusing only on one thing. Their building is only focused on envelopes, on others only on heating, ventilation, others only on renovation and renewables. There are not many companies that are able to offer a comprehensive solution to a client. Cecilia, and when we talk about the eco bonus and other things, in your experience, and to compare what is your experience with what Fernando said, what is your experience with eco bonus? What advantages do you see to it? Was this 10 times more investment for a reason in Italy? Why was it? Could you please tell us a little bit more about your experience? I wanted to start with the premise. In Italy, though we've been working with Ecobonus for a very long time, we have the same limitations when it comes to the industry. Companies are atomized, like Fernando said. And as a businesswoman in the field of building and construction, energy renovation is a new industry where a greater part of the building industry that is in crisis may target to, but we have to help this industry to renovate itself and adapt and create specific services for the new market. A new market that will open up and that offers more opportunities that go beyond grants, help, and specific schemes. So in Europe, as we're undergoing a very specific case, we've realized that we have to ignite a little bit the industry. But what we find is that there is an absence of demand. People would change their windows because they looked nicer or uglier, but not for energy efficiency. That was a secondary condition that they would take into account. So we have to produce the demand as well as the supply. This is a very important matter because the eco-bonus system means that different ministries have to cooperate together because we have the Ministry of the Treasury in Italy that has to make a series of calculations and make sure that it is worthwhile to renounce to part of their tax income. But at the same time, they have to make controls to make sure that the money is being well invested and that eco-bonus is going to incentivize certain technical interventions that are worthwhile. And all the different bodies have to cooperate together with the Ministry of Economic Development. So because they have certain competencies on building and construction. They are obviously extremely complex. You have to plan them or organize them and development, so they're organized for some time. The eco-bonus scheme responds to what the EU published recently in the Renovation Wave initiative, stating that when it comes to building rehabilitation, we need tools that will fund them, that are easy, accessible, and implementable. And I think EcoBonus responds to these three ideas. So why don't we have yet in Italy a higher rate of energy renovation or more ambitious one? Because that's something that we have to think about. Energy saving is not the one we expected, it's much lower. Well, first of all, I think, and it's something that I'd like to lay on the table because replicating this system, in my opinion, could help us know what we've done wrong. Italy has been a bit of a pioneer developing this tool. And I sincerely think that Spain could also implement it because your country is also doing a lot in this area. So maybe similar programs and schemes could be implemented, avoiding these mistakes. First of all, you need a very broad timeline. You need to think along the line of 10-year slots. because it's not only important to create the demand, it is important to give the supply the opportunity of innovating, learning, and thriving. So you need a 10-year period for that. You can't do like we've done in Italy to issue an eco-bonus that expires at the end of December. So we know that in December we're going to get it for another year. You see, this way it's very difficult for the market to organize itself and to invest in innovation and in creating new services, because the timeline is very short and you don't know what's going to happen afterwards. That is why it's so important to have a long-term strategy. Eco-bonus is targeted to supporting specific technologies. And as we've said before, it's very good to study the envelope like we said before, but before that you need a quality project that will include other technologies. So something that is being talked about now is not only about talking about the specific technology and whether it is susceptible of receiving economic support or not. It focuses more on the results that are going to be obtained. Programs and schemes should focus on the results obtained, because right now in Italy we have 30 different types of tax deductions with different percentages depending on the type of project, but it doesn't depend on the energy saving or quality obtained in the end. So of course it's extremely difficult to develop a program like this. We have a series of standards and rules, but now it is about weighing the project at large. But that's a different matter altogether. And I'm going to conclude because otherwise I will take too long. Yeah, the controls, that's essential. Something like what's happening in Italy now is fabulous. But I'm going to criticize a little the law because it's what we've done. It doesn't have controls, and without control, the marketplace runs the risk that the money is not being invested how it should be invested. And controls are good for companies because they make serious companies play an important role, because they're controls for everybody and for anybody who's operating in this field, and that's why it's so important. So you design the scheme, the aid, and when you do that, you have to think about how you're going to control the results that are achieved, so things that can be done the way they should be done. Finally, we're talking about 3,000 million, if I'm not mistaken, investment, but the investments are the result of the incentive, but that's not the incentive. So if I have an incentive that covers 10%, let us say, of a project, I can also calculate how a market with a larger investment possibility can be activated. So this is a sign and quota you can use to start working on developing a project, and to use a similar tool that's adapted to the eco-bonus in order to push forward a very long-term project. You have to remember that the renovation projects that we carry out are efficient. We also need to stop thinking about that you're changing the boiler for another one that's using well, and that is energy. Renovation, no, that is no longer energy renovation. That is part of the past. Now we're talking about something that's totally different, most particularly taking into account the complexities of our situation.
Yes, I would like to pick up on some of the concepts that you mentioned, and we can discuss those with the idea you talked about, for example, state aid and grants to the sector. We are convinced that this will create a sort of tractor effect in the sector, and it's important that we subsidize so that we can strengthen the sector. You also referred to limits, which is fundamental for us, and two things which are very clear in our minds: results and control. In this respect, it's important to mention that what type of aid or programs or grants should be granted. Well, grants that facilitate excellence, for example, with a 10% reduction and an improvement in a letter classification, we will be assigning a subsidy of 30%. We should overcome these type of situations and limitations. Those of us who are engaged in passive house standard renovation work have to understand that our buildings are above an A, and often the non-economic effort is not recognized. It's often just about technical knowledge and control on project sites. And we believe that our buildings' features will be far superior with very reduced cost increase of 5 to 10%. At the end of the day, we're talking about achieving the highest level of profitability in this private-public collaboration, squeezing the most out of this as possible. And this is a demand which we have considered with the support of the pre-grants programs, and something which concerns us at European level, given the need to, let's say, reactivate the economy. We really have to prioritize excellence. And in this sense, we believe that Passive House, because we believe that there's no more demanding and rigorous standard, can offer anything better in terms of features. And this is something that we would like to present. So I know at the end of the day that following a criterion, with 300 million, we can carry out certain renovation projects, and with the same 300 million, we could do a completely different type of building or project with completely different features and characteristics. We may have to do 5% less building work or 5% fewer projects, but at the end of the day, the result is what matters. What I can say is that is the aim that's covered in the pre-grant subsidy program of the government. The idea being to increase the letter classification by 2, not just integrated in passive solutions, but also renewable energies. All of this is prioritized and rewarded with more aid. And the pre-PREE state grants program, if it's a basic renovation, well, it's 15%, and more aid in percentage terms is granted because it's rewarded. Another thing is, if the market doesn't require this, the market is demanding this excellence. Aid is linked and tied or bound to that excellence, and it's something that's specified in all tender conditions and specifications. All technical experts love this. The idea being for buildings to be excellent in terms of comfort and energy efficiency terms, but often these solutions are only partial solutions. Often the solutions are often simply to replace a boiler or thermal insulation, but nobody's presenting projects for geothermal insulation investments. The idea is to come up with integrated comprehensive products and add photovoltaic solar power. All of this is prioritized and rewarded under the state grants program. There is a basic type of aid, which is through an increase in the letter classification, but we'll have to see exactly what we can achieve with these improvements in aid. You presented this as a proposal before the design of the grants program, and we answered and said that it was considered. The amount of aid could be greater or less. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what the result is. We'll have to see if the market will actually present quality projects. That is our aim, and that is what we seek to achieve. That's the objective, but we also have to find room for, let's say, designers or projects that don't have so much money. We cannot only say that only projects where improvements in the envelope are introduced in there. You have to find an ideal solution. We give more aid to those that can do this and incorporate all of these benefits, but those who cannot will also have to support as well. Thank you very much, Fernando. We are running very behind schedule, but I don't want to leave out Jose Antonio Garrido, who's also here waiting to take the floor. We have to recognize that Jose Antonio Carrillo's presentation for us was very interesting. To some extent, it also offers another insight into our perspective, something that's very close to our approach. Passive House is much more than a standard. It's also a tool to achieve objectives that have been summarized in 5 words: living better with less energy. And Jose Antonio reminded us that all of these matters are also covered in the Spanish Constitution. Well, we should also see Passive House as you have done in relation to many different concepts, Jose Antonio. But apart from that, As you know, we are people that like to be much more active and get down to action, but we would also like to ask you whether you are convinced, because I think you are convinced, what are the real projects that you are going to undertake in the autonomous community in the near future? Well, apart from welcoming all of you to this conference, after listening to all of your comments, I would like to give the perspective of Castilla-La Mancha. As you said, Castilla-La Mancha has only just recently joined Passivhaus standard in 2019. We joined your platform in Burgos. And it's been through the experience, such as the ones described by Veronica in Aragon, that was developed by Veronica's team, and all of the information that you've sent to us through the platform. But from everything that you mentioned, I've noted down many tools. Some of these were very new for me because they're very useful. And I think that we haven't talked a lot about the how. And if you will allow me, from the point of view of a region that's just joined the Passivhaus movement, there are many people don't even know what the what and the who are all about. We're talking about Passivhaus and the work that Veronica talked about, word of mouth, residents that already enjoy Passivhaus comfort. Well, I think that's fundamental in our region. We are currently initiating different projects that I will discuss. But the feeling that we have after speaking with developers and all of the different stakeholders involved, that there's great lack of awareness and a lack of knowledge about this. It's true that these type of events can do a lot to promote Passivhaus, but there's a great deal of ignorance about Passivhaus. I'm currently Director General of Town Planning and Urban Planning, although I am still linked to my former field. You know, I think that only 15% of the region was covered by projects relating to energy efficiency renewal. And I'm not even getting close to integrated projects, not just in terms of envelope, but all parameters involved. 15% only in our region. But it's important to understand market dynamics. Companies that were dedicated to lift and elevator maintenance, well, we really tried to get the most out of the ministry's funds as possible in an effective manner. This has led us to a situation where there's a great deal of lack of knowledge. It's important to look at how the market's behaving. It's all about supply and demand. Residents or citizens that enjoy these benefits in their homes, and also companies that are highly atomized. Each company is dedicated exclusively to its own field of expertise. Those of us who have just recently joined this, let's say, field of development have to really put a lot of enthusiasm in this through the organization of different events to explain to people what it's all about, and also develop instruments that have practical efficiency. It's true that the title of my presentation was not just in relation to the Spanish Constitution and also the way in which our Constitution embraces all of these important values such as health, environment, and the right to a decent home, but also Passivhaus standards. But I agree with everything. All of this has to be consolidated through positive, concrete actions. And we have to look at the different type of initiatives that are being carried out by the government of Castilla-La Mancha and Aragon. There always has to be an energy efficiency component, and one step forward would be to achieve almost zero energy consumption buildings. We also have to include this in the different type of tender specifications to incorporate the Passivhaus component. So there's a before and an after. There's not going to be any public home development programs that don't comply with these type of conditions. Given the general ignorance of the sector, we have to use different examples, such as the one of Aragon. And also, given the costs, the public authorities can also do this with the assistance of private stakeholders. But if we want to serve as an example, and we're already working on this, the model is based on the homes that were described by Veronica in Aragon, but there's also another series of examples that can also be mentioned relating to private developments that are also possible. We're also informing private developers that they can do Passivhaus and also with those costs. And this is really going to benefit all citizens. So in this respect, it is important. But if you'll allow me, from our perspective, we have to do much more. And what are we doing? Well, we're fundamentally working on the regulations. We're reviewing regulations for both homes, taking into account all state competencies in relation to the technical code. We really have to consolidate these energy efficiency criteria. And also, in terms of town and urban planning and also territorial organization, it's something that's not often mentioned. And Pedro, you know this because you are somebody that's got a great deal of experience in this. We also have to adapt these type of town plans to consolidate these programs and models from the very outset. In many areas, you know that we are working on models such as the one in Navarra, on buildability, different types of quotas. There are different types of renovation aspects relating to envelopes in buildings that have to be taken into account. It's important to bear in mind that many town councils are reticent to embrace many of these new things, but we are working on this. And finally, we have to vindicate at regional level. We've always presented to all different state agencies and ministries that are involved in energy efficiency and housing and also town planning. We always have to present aspects so important, such as the one mentioned by Fernando, the tax aspect, and also the way in which the market behaves in terms of demand. Taxes cannot be a penalty on these type of actions. We cannot engage in contradictory measures. So tax incentives are very important, and it has to be very clear and transparent at state level. And finally, in any case, it's important to acknowledge the following. It's something that we have always promoted very strongly in the housing and town planning ministry. We really have to promote zero energy consumption buildings, but this requires specialized training. It's true that any energy efficiency improvement is important. The type of aid that was mentioned by Fernando through the institute that he represents is very important, but we really have to prioritize excellence, because excellence is the objectives that we should all strive towards. In other words, almost zero energy consumption buildings. So there's a whole range of measures, but Castilla-La Mancha has recently embarked on this journey, and I would like to encourage other regions to continue helping us as they've done so in the past. And thanks to all of you at the platform as well for your support. Thank you very much, Jose Antonio. We are running over time. Before I forget, I would like to mention to Fernando, who perhaps misinterpreted, we are delighted with the grants program that he mentioned, the 300 million that he mentioned. And we also look forward to being able to present many other comprehensive projects with Passivhaus solutions and energy efficiency solutions to be able to benefit from this aid. But as was mentioned previously, he knows us. And, I think that we all have to do some hard work as a platform but I just want to clarify that we do understand and we are grateful for all of that support as well. And we would be delighted to continue collaborating. Okay. Jose Antonio mentioned that refer to certain aspects relating to the Constitution, and I expect that education is also included. You refer to this study focusing on schools, and we also believe that there is another need there, a need for a medium, long-term plan. It's not something that we can resolve overnight, but we will need something to really get down to action. And I'm not sure what you think, but anyway, do you believe that we will be able to undertake this? We're talking about a whole series of parameters. So these are aspects that we have to bear in mind. There's a reality. We have to address this reality, and we cannot just ignore this and look the other way. I'm not sure if anyone would like to answer. Did anyone hear what I said? No, I don't think anyone wanted to say. Well, I want to be very brief. We're just another stakeholder that can be involved here. We have embarked on this journey, but it's also true, and I have to say this, not everything is a bed of roses in this world. We've also identified some productive sectors have expressed certain incredulous opinions about this. They still need conviction. They still need to be convinced. The question of cost is very important. The question of cost is the first issue that's always mentioned by developers. Of course, we've given examples such as the one in Aragon, which have been highlighted. But it's a very arduous journey, an arduous task, which has to be accompanied, as Fernando mentioned, by aid, grants, and also tax incentives so that we can all follow suit. Well, I would simply just like to add one point, and in line with what was commented before. As far as I've been able to see in this phase, investments are initially targeted at citizens and then interiorized in terms of the example of the grants program that was explained perfectly by Fernando. In Aragon, we are studying this to be able to work and also invest in our own heritage, in our own building park, in improving schools, in health centers, etc., different infrastructures. But we have that defect. If we have to deduct all of the amounts in the budget that we have, and we were to use that budget for different buildings, we couldn't set aside aid for citizens. So investment in the government of Aragon's own building park is going to be very small because obviously there is work that has to be carried out inevitably. And the rest has to be for citizens. But once we have sorted out the aid and subsidies for citizens, then we can sort out our own backyard. But I can confirm that fresh air is going in through the windows that are open in our schools to ensure that ventilation is better. But working together with our colleagues in the PRE in Aragon, we have to try to designate as much budget as possible to ensure that citizens can enjoy better comfort in their homes. And then we can see what we can do in our case.
I think that we either or do it now in the following year, or if we don't, we run the risk of having problems, because what is happening at a European level with the recovery and renovation facility, I don't know how you translate it in Spanish, and with this wave of renovation, has shown us that this is the time, the right time to look for the resources and invest them well. So it's right now when we have to look for and bid for long-term renovation tools to carry out comprehensive and integral development projects so that market operators are brave enough to invest in the creation of new services and new products so that projects are of increasing quality. The time is now. I have been working in this world for over 15 years. And I always found myself alone, like speaking to the wind. But now it's wonderful because I can share my opinion with others. The topic is on the table and it covers the most important issues. And I really mean it. This is the time. The time is ripe. We have to believe in it, because if we start questioning these things, then we're never going to achieve our goals. I fully agree with you, yes. Thank you, Cecilia. Bruno, I'm sure you have something to add. No. Indeed. It is true that we have to work at schools, and our association has developed a program for this. It's a very ambitious one to get in touch with administrations, both at a national as well as local level, to achieve what Pedro said before. To understand that this is not a problem, but a way of moving things forward. And we have started preparing things, and to the extent that you can help us, we'll be grateful, whether those of you who are attending as speakers or those of you who are listening at us via your laptops, phones, or computers. What's important is to disseminate this message and show that it is a solution. I think we're late on schedule. Pedro, maybe the time has come to conclude the panel? Yes, we are over time. But I don't think that we should cut the debate short here. I'm sure people have continued listening to us. If you wish, you can close or adjourn the session. Well, the only thing I wanted to say is that I'm grateful to all the speakers for the high quality of your presentations. I'm also extremely grateful to all attendees. And Pedro, if you wish, you can say the final closing words. Well, yes, once again, thank you all very much for, making us all realize that we love discussion and debate. And we're actually discussing and debating because it's interesting and because we're utterly convinced of what we are defending. And all of us will follow along these road, and Passivhaus is more than a standard. It's a transformation instrument that goes beyond economic and financial matters, encompassing social transformation and energy matters, environmental, economic transformation. It includes so many more advantages than just the financial, as well as goes beyond the physical matters of building. If we could find a instrument that worked better, well, the 800 and something members of the PEP, the Spanish Passivhaus Association, would go for it. Like Jose Antonio said, it's enshrined in our constitution and bylaws, but I think that this is essential. And for us, this is all about responsibility. And I'd like to encourage you all. We've tried to be facilitators of the process, to make it easier for associations and people who want to fight for this and endorse this and support it, to help them. And with no further ado, I'd like to say goodbye. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and that you have access and contact the platform should you require any further information or help. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.